Welcome to the Wild Type Podcast. I'm Neptune the Chameleon.
I'm Lyssa's Lizards.
And we're your reptile girlies. Don't you just love when your nails match your t-shirt?
I'm like obsessed with your whole situation that you have going on right now.
We are very matchy-matchy.
Very, very purple.
And my shirt says, ask me about my pet chameleon.
Which is, we love it when we're on brand.
One person, actually, I wore this shirt. Where was I? Target. And they're like, so what's about your chameleon?
What should I ask?
Like, they literally asked me about it, except for it was like a pop-in, pop-out Target run. Like, I was like on a time crunch, and I was like,
I don't have time to do this.
Dang it. The one time someone asked me about my chameleon, I literally have 30 seconds to get out of the store right now.
You're like, would love to tell you.
Send me a DM. No,
I'll answer every question on YouTube.
No, hilarious. So I just got my hair done recently. Mm-hmm. And I was getting my hair done, and you're going to be so proud of me. So, like your hairstylist, like, chats with you, whatever.
Oh, I am very close with my hair guy. He knows all of my life secrets.
Okay. A little concerned for you, but okay. No, and so this is where you're going to be very proud. She's like, have you seen Love Island? And I was like, no, but my friend watches it, and she's looped me in, and can you believe, and like, I obviously can't speak to, like, names and everything, but, like, I knew you'd be so proud of me.
You gossiped to your hairdresser about a show that I have filled you in on. I have never been happier.
I knew this would just, like, make your whole day.
This literally, I can't even express to you how happy that makes me, because that means that you basically had a reality TV, like, gushing session, which is, like, my favorite thing, where you just, like, gush about this stuff. I know you weren't gushing, but I'm sure she was.
Yeah.
And the fact that you knew tidbits of information
just
because
tidbits.
of me.
Just tidbits, just enough to hold my own.
I am so proud. I am so proud.
This is her first season watching it, and she's hooked, and she's like, now I gotta watch the other ones. I did tell her, I was like, have you watched the non-US ones? Mm-hmm. And she's like, I've heard good things, so she's gonna start watching them. And I only said that because of you.
I'm very, very proud of you just for knowing that, but also allow me to have a minor Love Island reality TV tangent because it's important.
I knew this was coming. I set you right up.
It's important. I find it fascinating that it's the first time her watching it. I have watched Love Island USA since season 2. I didn't watch the first season, but
what season are we on?
We're on 6.
Okay, so that's helpful to know.
For sure. And it's really, really fascinating because Love Island started in the UK. So that's like the OG. And it is fantastic because they have all this, like, British lingo and, like, slang words. And the way they, like, chit chat with each other is, like, so different.
Totally.
So because of that, like, rightfully so, when it came to the US, it was a little bit lame. It was also on live TV in the US, which meant, like, they couldn't have swear words. They couldn't have, like, super raunchy stuff, filtered, like all these things.
Totally.
So the first, like, I would go as far as saying, like, the first, like, few seasons, there are some good ones in there. I liked it enough to watch all of it from, season 2 through 5. I liked it enough to watch it, but it got really, really, really good this season because the host is Ariana Madix, which is from Vanderpump Rules, which is my other diehard reality show.
Yeah.
So there's that factor. And she's a fan, an OG fan on the show. The whole reason she got the hosting gig is because she brought up Love Island in the midst of a breakup with her ex, which was national news. And so because of all that, she got the show.
Full circle.
And so having, like, a host who's a legitimate, like, day one fan has really shifted the show.
She's invested.
Yes. Yeah. And so now I've been seeing on social media that a lot of people from, like, the Bravo network reality shows are now coming over to Love Island because of the new host.
Yeah.
And it's on Peacock for the first time, which means it's not on live TV. So they can cuss as much as they want. They can get raunchy with it. They can do all the things.
Yep.
So it's, like, one of the best seasons. So if you are not watching Love Island USA yet, please watch it. I promise you won't regret it. But
make sure you watch the podcast first.
Yes. Always important. But that's my little spiel. But I love that she's a newbie. That makes me so happy.
Yeah, her first season. So
that's so cool.
Anyways, her and her boyfriend are on a cruise right now, and I'm sure there will be all kinds of tea and drama and updates that happen from that. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing her in 3 months and getting
love it.
Getting the rundown. But
love it.
Today's podcast topic, just to reel us in a little bit
sorry,
here.
Sorry for my rant.
No, and I opened the can of worms. I knew exactly what I was getting into. Absolutely. So how to find a good breeder. And we've been asked this a few times. And I think is an essential thing to talk about because we have a lot of new reptile girlies who are interested or have maybe bought from a chain store and are interested in their next species of maybe going through a breeder. So I think this is a fantastic topic. We've both purchased from breeders. So I think it's good to kind of like run through the list. So the first thing I had was making sure that the babies are old enough.
Yeah, that's big.
Because we see a lot of people who will sell underage. That just sounds weird. But like underage.
That just sounds so weird. Underage reptiles, they should not be drinking.
No, underage. But like there is for most species, some sort of age range that is appropriate to then most likely ship them, but also easier for us as keepers. Like they're past kind of like the hurdle.
Well, because like think about it, it's like puppies, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't ever see any, dog breeders, selling their babies under the age of typically like 8 to 12 weeks, right?
Yep.
Or 8 to 10.
8 weeks is the usual minimum.
Yeah. And so like I will say I've seen some sold younger and that is typically a sign.
But then there's challenges, right?
Yeah.
Or yes, a great sign of like potentially not a great breeding situation. Same is true for reptiles.
Because you have to remember any animal coming into this world, it's just like with a human baby, right? Like they are completely vulnerable. They have no defense mechanisms. They have no ability to care for themselves. Reptiles have the ability to care for themselves, but you get what I'm saying. They're very vulnerable. Yes. And so there is just that certain age that they're not as vulnerable anymore.
Yes. And it's pretty standard, like for chameleons, 3 months, right? That is our marker. So if you have someone who's selling a baby that's under 3 months or an egg or something like that, then that's usually a sign that like something's not quite right.
Right. And and I mean, when it comes to snakes and everything like that, I've gotten several of my snakes at different ages. Tarzan was 3 or 4 months old. I think Hazel was closer to 6 months. I think Tarzan was like 3 or 4. So I think the 3 to 4 month range is pretty common for most reptiles, but obviously look into it based on your species and, your breeder and what's common and all of that. But I definitely think that's like a very, very important one. And like I said, it's the same with dogs, you know, you got to know that age.
Yep. So also a sign of a good breeder is, do they know the parents in the lineage?
Yeah. I think that's really cool.
Can they tell you who the dam and the sire are? Is typically the lingo that we use.
This is so funny. We had like a family dinner with my extended family this past weekend. And I was actually talking to one of my uncles about this because he was asking about LA Pet Fair and all the stuff. And so I was filling him in and I told him that I met, Barney's breeder. And he was like, wait, so is this like dogs where they have like the AKC and like all this stuff? And I was like, not that intense. I was like, but I absolutely had photos of both of Barney's parents.
Regulated and that you register.
Right.
You're like, this is a purebred Ambelobi Panther Chameleon with AKC number and where's AKC registered. So that's how I know all that. But no, you're totally right.
But I did tell him, I was like, I had photos of my specific chameleon's dad, mom, and uncle so that I had like an idea of what he would look like as a male. And I had photos of all of that. And I told him, I was like, actually, when I was talking to my breeder, she actually told me that there were definitely at least a few animals that were at that table that were somehow probably most likely related to Barney.
Lineage, yep.
Which was so cool. And my uncle was just like mind blown by this fact.
Yeah.
But I did tell him in that conversation, I was like, it's actually, if they don't have that information, it's not the worst thing in the world.
No, certainly not. But it is a good sign if they have the lineage, because odds are that means they have the parents themselves, bred them themselves, versus like maybe getting them from somewhere else, or it's a wild caught or something like that. And absolutely not. I do not know Neptune's parents or lineage.
And I'm trying to think, out of all of my other reptiles, I definitely didn't see photos of like all of their parents or anything. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's something that
not
like
a requirement.
Yes.
But it is a sign of a good breeder.
If it's something that they have, then like you got a good one.
Absolutely. Okay. Another one I had was, do they share husbandry in their enclosures?
Yeah. And I think this is a good one that we can bring up. Another one of our favorite breeders, Huff's Herps. He breeds African fat-tailed geckos, and that he is my breeder for my African fat-tailed gecko, Nessie, and also leopard geckos. And when I got Nessie from him, not only did he have on her little container at the expo, he had a little sticky note on there that had her lineage, her morph, all of the stuff that she was potentially like recessive for, whatever. It had the grams that she was when he put her in the container. I don't know why that was so hard for me to say.
Yeah.
But he had her exact weight, like all of this information on there. And right next to all of the animals on his table, he had a one-sheeter with for a one-sheeter, it was very detailed care information for both leopard geckos and African fat-tailed geckos. And if you see that on a breeding table or a breeder's table at an expo, that is such a good sign.
Yes, that's not what I meant.
Oh.
But that is a fantastic, absolutely fantastic point. What I meant when I said that was like their enclosures in husbandry, right? So
I went a totally different direction with that.
Is absolutely a sign of a good breeder.
For sure.
1000%. 1000%. But if you're talking to a breeder and you're asking them, hey, what's your supplement schedule? Hey, what's your UV? Do they tell you? Or are they like hush about it? Are they keeping them in appropriate size enclosures? A breeder that comes to mind for me is Fram's Cam's Chameleon breeders. They are constantly posting videos of their chameleon room. You see exactly how their enclosures are set up. So you have confidence that how they're caring for their animals, because how the parents are raised, how the babies are raised is going to impact your experience with your specific animal. So that was more the angle I was coming from.
Yeah, that's a great angle.
But what you were saying was totally fair too. So I thought that's more like, can they give you a rundown on like their care?
A rundown of their care, but also like just providing people, setting them up for success, because a good breeder is going to want to set up, be
able to ask and answer all your questions, and mentor you.
I would also say I agree with the mentoring thing. If you can find a breeder that, is willing to be a mentor, but also I think it is important to understand, like, they may not always have time for that.
Oh, for sure. But at least some sort of resourcing.
Yes. Which is why I love Seth at Huff's Herps gave that care sheet of like, here you go. You can email me, here's all my information on this one sheeter, and it's got all the extra care info. If you have further questions, you can email me. Yep. I think that's important. And like you said, answering questions, while, breeders obviously aren't going to have all the time in the world to like fully in-depth mentor you on animal care. I do think it's just somewhat of a sign of a potentially not great breeder if you're talking to them and asking questions and they're annoyed or they don't want to answer, or they, stuff like that. Yeah,
and if you're asking entry-level questions, we're like, what does a chameleon eat?
Right.
Then like, I would also be kind of annoyed, because then that tells me you haven't done any research. And if you're like, hey, can you explain the differences between, like, why do you only sell 3-month-old? That is like a breeder appropriate question. Or like, hey, I'm looking for this type of coloration. What morph do you recommend? Or I'm in between a leopard gecko and an African fat tail. Can you explain to me different new, like, that type of stuff seems more appropriate. If you're asking just general husbandry questions,
your breeder is not responsible for teaching you exactly how to care for this animal. You are responsible for finding your own care information, doing your own research, all of that, always.
I will say most breeders, though, have websites, which is also another sign of a good breeder. Do they have a legitimate website or a Morph Market or something like that? But typically, they'll have FAQs or care sheets on their website. Even if they didn't write it themselves, I've had breeders reach out to me and be like, hey, can I link your YouTube channel on my website? And I'm like, one, thank you for asking. And two, absolutely, because they don't need to reinvent the wheel. If there's already amazing care guides and resources, then they can just link them on. But they're making them available. Right. And they're making it easy for people to find correct care information.
And that is a fabulous sign of a good breeder. Yep. I mean, if they've got a fully fleshed out website, lots of FAQs, resources, detailed lineage information, care information, all of that on there, then you got a good one,
Another one, which seems obvious, but people skip this step, look up reviews.
Oh, this is so important.
Look up reviews.
I had this in my notes as well. This is like the most important thing, because there are a lot of times that I will get questions in my comments or my DMs or whatever about certain reptile companies, certain reptile breeders, things like that. And my response, because I am never going to outright say like, this is not, this and that. But my response is almost always, feel free to check out their reviews. Because the reviews will tell you so much.
Yes.
It will tell you of people's past experiences, what they've witnessed, anything like that. It is, if they have reviews available, it is so important to look at them.
Yeah, and look in your reptile groups, right? If you're a part of like Facebook groups or like the Chameleon forums, like do a quick search of like whatever the breeder's name is and see if people have firsthand experiences.
Totally.
Because then that's another way you can get like an informal review.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just search up that breeder's name in that Facebook group, see if anything good or bad pops up. That's always super helpful too.
Exactly. And be cautious if you just pop into Google some sort of reptile name for sale. Typically, the first couple websites that pop up are not going to be the legitimate ones. They're going to be the ones that are throwing the most money behind their ads. So that they're going to rank the highest.
Yep.
But that does not necessarily mean like you gotta dig deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also helpful to, check social media too and see, look at their comments. Do they have a lot of negative things in their comments? Do they have a lot of positive things in their comments? Do they,
or what do they post on their social media, right?
Yeah.
Is it healthy looking animals? What drives me nuts is when breeders like overly edit their pictures.
Especially chameleons, because they have such like the bright colors that it's like you don't need to edit them.
No, if the hand holding the chameleon is orange, I'm like, excuse me, like that is not an accurate representation, and that, in my opinion, is false advertising.
Agreed.
We are all guilty of a little tweaking, a little editing, a little here, little there. But it should be realistic, and so that is also like
totally
a good way.
I think definitely looking at the photos, and a lot of times, in their content, depending on if they're putting content out or any of that stuff, a lot of times, like you said before, finding out about their care information, sometimes you can see that from their social platforms.
Yep.
So I think that's, do a little digging,
Yep. Another thing I think is good to look into is the price point.
Yes.
Because too cheap and too expensive can sometimes be too good to be true and not a good sign.
So true.
Understanding what the average price point for your species is in the morph and whatever it is that that's going to be influencing the price.
Right.
Having a baseline understanding, so then when there's those outliers, you're able to identify them.
Yeah.
Because when it's a crazy good deal, it's probably for a reason. And there's a difference between like someone running a discount or a sale versus like this one's a couple $100 cheaper than everyone else. Like
totally.
Probably a little too good to be true.
Yeah, agreed. And sometimes if it's too high, is that something you're willing to do too? I mean, it's just, that's definitely an important factor too.
Yep.
So the only one other note that I had, and I don't know if we want to super talk about it or not, but Morph Market is a potentially good place to finding good breeders, especially I would say for snakes, but I will say they've expanded a lot and we have partnered with them in the past. And, I have found that is where I found Tarzan's breeder. That is where I found at least one or two others. I can't think off the top of my head, but for sure Tarzan, I found his breeder on Morph Market, and funny enough, his breeder isn't even like on Morph Market anymore at all, so that'll happen sometimes.
Yeah.
So I have found some good breeders on Morph Market, but you definitely want to like ask the right questions, all of that.
Yeah, you're still going through this. That's a good way to find breeders, and then you go through this checklist to then verify that they are a good breeder and someone you feel comfortable and confident purchasing from.
So that's just one of my like usual places where I'll at least like start my finding a breeder process.
Absolutely. It's the same as if you search on Instagram or you search on Google. Like it is an opportunity to find different breeders. And go from there.
Yeah. So that was just one, findable place that I wanted to mention.
Totally.
That's
a lot of
always
people
good.
have had great success, but there's always bad eggs.
For sure. No matter where you're searching.
Yeah. Another tip on finding a good breeder is if they will send pictures of your specific animal. That's really good, because a lot of times people just like put like, we have all these ball pythons, and it's like just one like standard picture.
Or sometimes they'll post pictures of, the sire and the dam, but not of the actual babies and things like that. I think so, but I do find that interesting that you bring that up because, for example, when I got my panther chameleon, I got him on a discount, and it was because that discount, the caveat with that discount was that you would not get a photo of your individual animal. Yeah. But I knew that it was such a good breeder that I was like, well, I'm not going to get a bad baby. Like they don't have bad babies.
And you knew the dam and sire,
Right.
So yeah.
Right. So I think it just kind of, but I did just want to note that because some breeders will do sales like that.
Yes. Nope. That is a fair point. I do think beyond that exception, though, there may be just like a standard picture of a baby animal. Right. But once you're in conversations of like they're asking for a deposit, and the reason why I say this is because there's so many scams on the internet where people have literally stolen pictures of Neptune and then come across as they are selling animals, and it's literally a picture of my chameleon.
That is so...
Then someone puts down a deposit, and then it's like,
oh yeah, that's infuriating. So while there are some situations like that, the reason I did that was because I knew how good of a breeder I was.
Yeah, and if you don't feel comfortable doing it, then you don't have to do that option. You don't 100%. Have to get that discount, and you pay the full price, and you get a picture of your baby. And like, again, that's the only breeder I know who does that. Most will have some standard picture that they advertise with, but then when you get into those conversations,
they'll show you
and you ask like, hey, can I have a picture of my specific baby? If they cannot do that, and maybe you ask them to hold up a newspaper with the date and time. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that.
It's a little dramatic.
No, don't do that. But they should be able to provide you specific pictures of your specific animal.
And I would say, I mean, it obviously like depends on the species and whatever, but like snakes in particular, you'll usually see, the individual animals, stuff like that. So it all varies. But
that is not an unusual request. I've just seen enough scams to be like, hey, like you should be able to
stay away from the scams.
See that picture.
For sure. You know the drill. Another month means another set of great deals from Pangea Reptile.
In honor of the Olympics, they're offering some golden prices for crested geckos, including one of our personal favorites, Dalmatians. We talk about how life plants can be tricky for pests, so if you're in the market for fake plants, this is the time.
And for those of you with a green thumb, tons of isopod species will be on sale looking for a new home in a bioactive enclosure. There are lots of other deals, including Labor Day, over at PangeaReptile.com.
Okay, if someone specializes in a few species, that's typically a sign of a good breeder, because this goes back to those top 5 websites that pop up when you search reptile for sale. And so not only specializing in a few species, but when you see that like oddball species that you've like no one else is breeding or having, again, is typically too good to be true when coupled with like a plethora of other species.
And I think it's pretty common to say, unless it's like a huge, breeding company, which, there are pros and cons to that too. And whether or not you want to stay, away or go towards that is up to you. But a lot of times in those situations, like you said, there's downsides. And one of those downsides is usually potential wild caught animals, because a lot of breeding companies will, they're doing imports for their own breeding projects, and then sometimes they'll sell them if it doesn't work out or whatever.
Which is totally a valid option if you want to do that, but that to me is a different category than a breeder who is actually choosing to breed. So if you at this point have decided, I've done my research, I'm choosing to go through a breeder, this is how you can kind of decide, is this person a true breeder or are they more of an importer?
Right. You literally read my mind. That was exactly where I was going with that. That was perfect.
I love it. Yeah. So that's typically, and I think in the past I've unintentionally been like, oh, they should only specialize in one. But like I've seen some really good examples where people have specialized in multiple species. Yeah. But I think when it becomes like paired with, like I said, those like really oddball like species that aren't typically found.
And I will say too, there's definitely some situations where it's like a reptile breeding business that like maybe one or two people are partnered on.
Yep. So they do a couple species, they do a couple species.
So I do think that is definitely something that can be really cool. Like, so definitely don't discount it if they have a lot of species, but just look more into it. Like what is the situation? Are they mass breeding? Are they doing, it more on a small level? Are they focused on, 5 or 6 projects versus 2 or 3? Like it's just all good stuff to be aware of.
Okay, another one I have is shipping best practices.
Ooh, yeah.
And by this, I mean, like, are they, checking your local weather? Are they making sure you're going to be home? Like, are they doing, and this is under the assumption they are shipping a reptile. And we can get into buying in person in just a moment here. But, like, are they following the best practices for shipping a reptile? Like, if it's 110 degrees Fahrenheit where you are,
not be shipping
and they're
that.
like, yep, I'll send them tomorrow. Like, that is a very, very, like, not great.
Yeah.
Not a great sign.
Nilla's breeder, they actually physically picked up the phone and called me the day after she arrived to make sure that everything had gone well in the first 24 hours.
That's fabulous.
That was a huge sign. I mean, I already knew that they were a good breeder, but, that made me feel so good that I got a personal phone call to check in.
There should be constant communication. You should not be wondering if they have been shipped, when they're going to be shipped. Like, it should be so clear that you know what's going on.
This makes me think of Kermit's breeder so they shipped her in, and her breeder, I was like, literally like had his phone number and was like texting him, and they drove past my apartment and I saw
like the truck,
the FedEx truck. Yeah, I like saw it like drive past, and I was like, I'm pretty sure that's my truck. I'm pretty positive that's my truck. And I literally like went outside and was like calling her breeder, and I was like, I'm pretty sure that the truck just drove away from my house. And I was like freaking out about it. And he literally immediately reached out to the shipping company and was like, hey, go tell, FYI, this live animal that's sitting on your truck, by the way, pretty sure it just passed by and isn't going to the, delivery location. And within literally 45 minutes, the truck was back in front of my place.
See?
Because they
Love
had called.
That.
So like,
love that.
There are definitely it's important to be in good contact with your breeder.
And it's
for
hard
those
to
reasons.
like articulate what is good shipping versus what is bad shipping, but like communication is huge, and them putting the well-being of the animal ahead of making the sale and things like that. As someone who had just shipped a reptile for the very first time, it is absolutely petrifying. And I cannot imagine not being in constant communication.
It was so important. And it'll depend on like the breeder that you're working with, like what size their business is at too, because some of them will give you their personal cell phone number. Some of them it's through email only. Sometimes so there's all these different levels of communication and all of that, but regardless, you should be able to contact them and hear back within like a day or so.
Especially when it comes to shipping. Like at that point you've purchased the animal. It is a matter of getting them there on time. Absolutely.
Just while we're talking about shipping, I just have like one little pro tip. If you are nervous about it, if you live in apartments, if you whatever, like all of those things, and this has nothing to do with breeders, this is just a shipping tip because it's on my brain and I can't not say it. But if you have it shipped to like the hub
that's
of wherever,
becoming more popular now. Some breeders are only shipping to hubs, and they are no longer shipping to doorsteps. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but like I know exactly where your thoughts going with this. Yeah,
but that's why, and that's actually again a good sign of a good breeder if they're recommending to ship it to the hub, because that is like one less moving vehicle that your animal has to go in, where it's potentially in a truck with a bunch of other packages.
There's that,
like I find that a lot of peace in that, knowing that like that's one less busy packed truck that my animal's gonna have to sit on. I go and it is in my front seat buckled in, and I know that everything is like totally safe and good. So that's just like, if you're feeling iffy about it, that's a good thing. And if you have a really good breeder, maybe they'll suggest that. So just something to be mindful of.
The other thing with the hub, when we're dealing with weather, is if they deliver to your house, then the animal's sitting on your doorstep. And you may not even be notified that it's on your doorstep, and it may be hot, it may be cold, depending on the season. If it's at the FedEx hub, they are in an air-conditioned or heated environment, so they are not left on the doorstep. So that is another
pro tip.
Another reason why the hubs are becoming more and more popular.
I did that with, I don't know why I didn't do that with Kermit. But I didn't for whatever reason. But I did it with Barney.
Yeah, when I got Venus, she went to a hub, and when I shipped out Socks, he went to a hub. Yeah,
I think it's just a lot smarter. Like you said, the air conditioning and
most people have FedEx hubs within a reasonable driving distance. Yeah. So, okay, and then the last thing I wanted to touch on for this topic was just slight nuances when it comes to expos and buying from pet stores when it comes to finding a good breeder. So if you're going to purchase from a reptile expo, both of us have done so. Yeah. But I think ahead of time there should be a vendor list. So you can do all these preliminary steps prior to even going to the expo. You can be vetting these breeders prior to going to the shows. So then you have a high level of confidence. So you don't fall in love with that animal. And you're like, so like, tell me about it. Like that is so difficult to try and do in the moment. So take the time beforehand to research the vendors. And if there's amazing ones, fantastic. And if they're not, then maybe you just go to hang out, get some supplies, and you don't end up purchasing an animal.
100%. I think that's really, really important for sure.
Yeah. And then pet stores, that's hard. Because like breeders will sell wholesale to stores. And so just recognize like there's differences between buying from a breeder in like a wholesale situation or a pet store situation. But then we have reptile specialty shops that do get from breeders. And so I just wanted to throw that out there, that you can still have these same types of conversations even when you're purchasing from a reptile store. Like they may not know the lineage, but they should be able to tell you the breeder. They should be able to tell you how they're caring for them, like all those types of questions.
And just to also be super clear, we are not judgmental at all about where you guys get your reptiles.
No, not at all.
Every single option that we have mentioned today, we have done.
Yeah.
One of my babies is from PetSmart. One's from a reptile shop. Many are from individual breeders. One was from Craigslist.
Yeah, we've done them all.
We've done it all. Figure out what works best for you. All that we care about is that you're getting a good, healthy animal.
Correct. Yep.
And that you are, happy with your decision. That is the most important thing. So.
Yep. I do not want to get another DM about a reptile arriving dead on arrival.
Oh, it's so heartbreaking.
Like those are the most gut-wrenching.
Awful.
Or what I think is even worse than it showing up dead, which I know is hard to believe, but when it dies like 2 days later, because then they feel at fault, like it's their fault, or blame themselves or guilty. They're like, I killed it. I was like, and then like talk me through your care, right? I was like, even if there were a couple things that were off, none of that.
Nothing is going to kill that animal in 2 days.
No. And then like, show me a picture of when you first brought it home, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Not good. So this is why it's so important. Hopefully these tips are helpful for you guys on how to find a good breeder. Please let us know if you have any tips or suggestions. We would love to hear from you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you have any other ones to add in?
No. That was mainly my, you really covered all that.
So I literally just pulled my YouTube video, how to find a good breeder, and just went through everything that's
super
that
handy.
I listed in
super
there.
Handy.
So if you forget and you want to watch my face say the exact same thing, feel free.
You can do it on multiple sources on the internet.
Yeah, feel free. Okay, we want to introduce a brand new segment.
Fun new little girly pop talk.
Yes, so this is a new segment called Things People Say When You're Single.
Yeah, we've heard it all.
Soon to be followed up by Things People Say When You're in a Relationship.
Yes.
Because there's always those things that everyone says unsolicited, whether you ask for it or not.
Usually you don't.
Yeah. So the one we're going to talk about today is it'll happen when you least expect it. You're single.
The amount of times I've heard that.
Either you've been single for a couple weeks, couple months, whatever it is, and then you go to that family event, or you're out with coworkers, or you're talking to one of your girlfriends, whatever, and you're just like explaining your frustration. You're like, I can't find anyone. The dating pool out there is terrible. And then they give you the punchline.
It'll just happen when you least expect it, babe.
And you want to slap them.
And you're like, shut up. I know. I know.
No, so we have two different viewpoints on this. Mine's the like, I want to smack you.
You're frustrated, yeah.
Frustrated because they're like, it'll happen when you least expect it. As if like I'm on pins and needles here anticipating for it like to happen like tomorrow. But also like, it'll happen when you least expect. Like, what? Am I just supposed to like
give up?
Like just like not put myself out there,
put no effort in.
Yeah. As if like someone's just gonna knock on my door and be like, "Hello, my lady, I am here for you."
That's like one of those annoying, unsolicited, like it's not
it's
so much
well intentioned.
It's so well intentioned.
So well intentioned.
And as somebody that happened to, it happened when I least expected it.
Yeah.
Like I get why people say it. I personally am very cautious of like never saying it because I know how infuriating it can be to hear that.
Yeah.
And there is some truth to it, and we'll get into like my side of that in a minute. But
sure.
It's so frustrating because it's one of those unsolicited things that it's like, okay, like what do you want me to do with that? Like what action can I take from that statement? Nothing. So like, why are we just saying it? It doesn't make me feel any better. It doesn't make anybody feel better. It doesn't make anybody feel good. It's just one of those things that you just like roll your eyes at and you're like, yeah, thanks for telling that to me for the 1,000th time.
Because then it makes me feel like I kind of have to check out or step out of the effort that I'm putting in. So then I'm not expecting it. So I'm just like going about my life, and then all of a sudden someone's going to like cross paths, which absolutely happens for some people. But I feel like as someone who like worked from home for multiple years, for someone who's more in the suburbs than in the city, like where am I organically meeting someone? Not impossible, absolutely still possible, but much more difficult with the lifestyle I live.
Well, it's also one of those things where it's like, let's be honest, there's like a statistical probability of like how you're going to meet someone, right? Yeah. And if you're just like not putting in any effort at all whatsoever because it'll happen when you least expect it and you're just like banking on that, your probability of finding someone goes way down. Yeah. So it's just like...
And you have to be in the mentality to even want a relationship, even if it's a teeny part. And you're like, it wasn't until I met them that I wanted to like settle down, or I didn't want it to have anything to do with anyone. There still had to be some part of you that was open to the idea of dating, even if it took a little bit of time to get there, because otherwise you wouldn't have dated them in the first place. Right. And that's like where you kind of fit in the mix.
Yeah, for sure. Like I definitely was one of those people where like at the time when I met Logan, first off, it was in the middle of the pandemic, right? So like we met on Hinge, like in the early days of the pandemic.
Yeah, you were like summer 2020.
Yeah, it was like I think we officially like matched on Hinge in like April of 2020. So like 1 month into the pandemic. It was like real early, right? But like all before that, 2019, if I'm being really honest, was a little bit of like my party girl stage. Like I was very much going out all the time, always meeting people, kind of going on dates, doing Hinge, but meeting people in person. Like I was dating a lot in like the 2018, 2019 timeframe. And like I got really just done dirty by several guys. And so when I finally like matched with Logan, I was like, whatever. Like I literally was not thinking positively at all. I was in a very negative headspace when it came to dating. I was very like counting out.
You were obviously putting yourself out there to some extent because you were on the apps.
I was also bored in the middle of quarantine.
Fair. Fair.
What else was I going to do?
But you weren't like actively, proactively like dating with intention of like, I'm really trying to like find my person. So
not at all.
You weren't expecting it is what it comes down to.
I wasn't expecting it. I didn't really want it. I literally had re-downloaded Hinge after 6 months of not being on it because I was bored at home in quarantine, nothing else to do. Yeah. So like I was not looking for it whatsoever. So I do agree with the sentiment of like, it'll happen when you least expect it, because I was not expecting it during a quarantine after dating a bunch of losers for however many years. Like, I was not expecting it at all.
Right, so there's some validity to it, but it can sometimes come across, I think, not how it was intended for someone who's like, yeah, but I am trying to, like, do that and put in that effort and everything else, and so...
It's also something that I think is disheartening to somebody who... like you specifically, not to like put you on the spot or anything, but like you specifically, like you're someone that, you know, you want kids, you are ready to find your partner. You've kind of done like a lot of the things in life that are really important to do when you're single. You've like done those things. So it's like to somebody like that saying like, it'll happen when you least expect it. It's like, okay, but I'm like actually ready for it now. And as women, if we know that we want kids, if you don't, that's fine. I'm still on the fence. But like, if you know that you want kids, like you can't help it. You do have a little bit of that like biological clock. Yeah. So those words of like, it'll happen when you least expect it, when you're ready and you like want that can be kind of disheartening and like a little just irritating to hear.
That's why I want to smack. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. And I know it's so well intentioned. And I totally I love hearing how people met and their stories.
You are the biggest fan of love. I just have to say this. She is like
love.
my most, like one of my most supportive friends when it comes to just like being the biggest cheerleader in like my relationship. Like you love for your friends. And like, that's something you are very, very good at. I just have to say.
I appreciate it. Yeah, and so like I get it, and I love hearing people's stories of like how they met, and it's like the relationship that shouldn't have happened, or the stars had to align in order for this to work out the way that it did, or like this crazy thing happened that allowed this door to open. Like those are absolutely fantastic, and I love to hear it. But as someone who is actively trying to like find it, I'm like, shut up.
No, I totally get that, because trust me, when I was single, there were a lot of times where I was like very bitter because I hated all the guys that I had ended up dating, and like somebody would tell me that, and I'm like, yeah, but they all suck, Karen. They all suck.
You just can't win.
So it's, just be a little cautious when you say that to someone. See what mindset they're in first.
So this is our new segment. Feel free to add in things in the comments of things you've heard people tell you when you were single. And like I said, we'll do an equivalent segment of things people say when you're in a relationship. And maybe we can do a segment of things people say when you're married. Because those are just... you just hear them all the time, and you're just like, really?
If I get asked about having babies one more time, I swear.
It happens. But
but we might as well title this "Things People Tell Us That Are Annoying."
This is the nicer way to say it, but yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, I feel good about that. I feel like I need that little venting session, just to
basically just an excuse for us to vent about things, honestly.
You're right.
It's a little bit of what this segment is, but we love it.
I feel like that's therapeutic.
We need this.
And we cannot be the only ones who feel these frustrations.
No. We hope that you feel the frustrations too, not because we want you to experience them.
No. Just so we feel validated.
Just because we can relate.
Yes, so we don't feel so alone in this crazy world. Yeah, I think this was a fantastic episode. I think we had a good balance. You'll learn something new. You feel a little mini therapy better session, and you need that. I think to wrap this up, we should go get ice cream after this.
I'm so down, honestly. That sounds fabulous right now.
Which is a lot, because she's hit or miss with getting ice cream.
I really am. Some days I'm literally not in the mood, and I'm very in the mood for ice cream today.
So I'm going to be taking full advantage of that. So you will catch us over at the ice cream shop after this. But before we go, thank you guys so much for tuning in. You, of course, can follow the podcast on all socials at the Wild Type Podcast. Subscribe, leave us a comment, leave us a thumbs up, leave us a review. Yeah.
Send us a voice memo on Instagram, because Spotify's being weird.
Spotify's making all kinds of changes. They're really taking features, putting new features in. So I feel like at the point that this episode goes out, I don't even want to say anything because it might be different. So do the things, whatever they have available to you. Participate, engage, interact with us. We would love to hear from you guys. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in. You can follow me at Neptune the Chameleon.
Lyssa's Lizards.
And we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Bye, y'all.